Everybody, happy Wednesday. Norwich City, of course, in action again tomorrow night. The big one, the one that might define whether we have a long trip to Wembley or we're going to be packing up the suitcases and jetting off on a summer holiday instead. Hopefully, it's going to be Wembley. Of course, Adam Harvey here, joined by Connor Southwell for your preview show. We want your comments, questions, score predictions, thoughts and feelings heading to Elland Road. Are you nervous? Are you excited? Do you think Norwich can do it? Get them all down below, and we'll come around to those in a little while. Connor, just to start, there's no press conference for this game. I've seen a few people on socials mention it. Do you just want to just outline the reasons behind that?
Yeah, no press conference. Neither club has decided to do one, and that is their prerogative as things stand. So not to get too technical and boring with it, but essentially, usually they are mandated really to do a press conference by the EFL, by the league, as was the case for the first leg. I think after obviously Sunday's game, the managers conducted their post-match media situations, and Leeds probably made it clear that they weren't going to, and Daniel Farke wasn't going to do one. Norwich then consulted with the EFL to find out exactly what the ruling was, and they've also decided not to do one, mainly because of course there's information there in terms of team news, and they don't want to be seen to be giving Leeds United an advantage, which I can completely understand, and they want obviously the full focus on the game tomorrow night. So that's the situation. That's why we're not rocking up at Colney today to give you the latest team news, but I think we're hopefully in a relatively educated place to give you some steerings more than anything else. But yeah, that's the reason essentially why I think with the stakes so high, most Norwich fans can probably understand that, because quite rightly, if David Wagner was to walk into the press conference room at Colney and sit down, probably the first question I would bowl at him is, how's Josh Sargent? And that's obviously not necessarily information that they would want to give to Leeds at this stage, if of course they don't have to, and they don't have to. So yeah, that's the reason behind the lack of press conference today.
Yeah, we'll just touch on the first leg very briefly. We're sort of 3 days on now from that game. We maybe gave our instant reaction in the podcast post-match. It was a cagey game, chances at a premium. David Wagner was very happy with the draw. I think Daniel Farke was probably happy with the draw as well. A few days on, do you reflect on it in the same way you did sort of straight after the game? Just now a 90-minute shootout at Elland Road for the chance to get to Wembley?
Yeah, do you know what, before the game, and I think maybe we even discussed it, I can't remember if we discussed it on camera, but definitely off camera, I felt that Norwich probably needed to take a lead to Elland Road, and maybe even a 2-goal lead at that. And actually, I think probably after Sunday's results, you reflect on it a lot more. And I said to you guys really in the build-up that I probably felt, a lot more confident about Norwich City in a final situation where it's a one-off game and the stakes would be high in that regard. So that's essentially now what they've created by managing to get a draw at Carrow Road. Now, of course, we can talk about the various pros and cons behind that, because there's pros and cons behind everything. There's pros and cons between having a lead, having a disadvantage, whatever. So, yeah, everyone has complete clarity on where they stand. It's a 90-minute shootout. The winner over the tie goes to Wembley, and that puts Norwich City, I think, in a good position, because certainly if they'd have been behind heading into this game, it would have been really difficult. Now the fact that they're level and it's all to play for, and it's a one-off shootout game, anything can happen in those football matches, as we know. This is essentially a cup game really for Norwich City. So yeah, I'm feeling okay about it. I don't know if I'll quite veer into the levels of optimism, but definitely they've got a chance, and if they can execute it, I think there is probably a clear route to Wembley for them. But clearly they would need a lot to go their way on the night, and obviously with that fitness bulletin as well that we mentioned. So yeah, look, it wasn't a great game on Sunday, was it? And loads of people have told me it was a bit of a snore fest, and I agree, which is a shame really, because the way it started and the intensity, particularly the opening half an hour that Norwich City played with, and then it just sort of died a death as a game. It sort of felt like two teams that were waiting for the other to do something, and neither team ever really did. I think Josh Sargent had the best chance of the game with that cross that came in with a header that he didn't quite connect with properly. There was a couple of block shots. Obviously, Leeds had the offside goal disallowed. I mean, from every angle that I've watched so far, unless Daniel Farke has seen one that is better than the ones that I've seen, that looks offside to me. And then obviously I think they probably have got a case with a penalty, albeit again, we're probably getting into whether or not that's inside or outside the area. So yeah, cagey, tight. I probably expect tomorrow to be a little bit different, but probably still have those same underlying characteristics, because it's a monumentally big game.
Yeah, I can see it in the comment section already. Sort of Josh Sargent being discussed. Jeffman with no pressure today. Any insight on Sargent's injury status? Blink 3 times if he's okay. I mean, Connor, I'm not going to make you blink, but I'm going to ask you to maybe expand on anything you know in terms of Josh Sargent. I mean, David Wagner post-match, Paddy sort of posed a question to him. He said, he feels like he'll be okay. He's sort of had to deal with different points this season where maybe that ankle has caused him problems, but he sort of had to fight through that. They've sort of offered him injections and various other means just to get him through. It's a one-game opportunity here, a chance to get to Wembley or a chance to end the season. It feels like if he's available, he'll be thrown in.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, it's if you're not keeping someone on the bench for this game, are you, in terms of fitness reasons? Because what are you resting them for? Really, you're not resting them for anyone. This is as we've mapped out, a one-off game, the biggest game of the season, in any regard. I think, to be honest, Josh Sargent, I'd be absolutely gobsmacked if he wasn't at Elland Road in some capacity, if I'm honest. Likewise, I think Ashley Barnes will make it as well. I think there's probably enough there to suggest that he will make it now. And the fact that it wasn't completely ruled out would make you think that he can play, even if it's a small part towards the end of the game. And, God forbid it goes to extra time and penalties, but he's the type of character that maybe you would want in that environment as well. So again, question marks probably over the scale or the size of the role that these two can play in particular, but you would like to think they can play a role. I think the concern obviously is are they fit enough to start? And if that's a no, how fit enough are they to play? Because if at 70, 80 minutes, the game looks like going to extra time, are they players that have got half an hour in them, plus a penalty kick if need be? Equally, if they start, are they only going to last, an hour and then have to come off? So it's a real dilemma that David Wagner's got, one that he's going to have to weigh up, and it's going to be really interesting to see which way it goes. But yeah, like you say, I think that the elements will be, so I think Norwich will need them essentially. So I think it's important that that they do hopefully pull through and play some sort of part.
Yeah, you mentioned Ashley Barnes. I mean, he sort of maybe hinted a little bit on his story. I think Sunday night he sort of said, I think Thursday with some eye emojis, and we kind of had maybe a little bit of insight that he might potentially be someone who's available. If he does, become available for the start, who do you drop out? Does he come straight back in? How does David Wagner play that? I mean, I've seen Jack Norwich here on YouTube saying, does Fashnak start over Rowe to give us a little bit more of a defensive solidity, or does he maybe give us an outlet to relieve pressure? I mean, if you're David Wagner, what's your starting 11, I suppose, for Thursday night?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because again, I think there's pros and cons to that. Is Fashnak more defensively solid? I'm not quite sure. Is if you put Ashley Barnes in there, do you have to drop out Marcelino Nunez? Do you have to go with a little bit of a different direction? I don't know. And does that then lose your quality in possession? We saw it at Birmingham away, when you take Marcelino Nunez out of that midfield, it's significantly weakened in terms of what they can do in possession. So I think there's pros and cons. I personally feel Ashley Barnes probably a role on the bench, and then you go with a similar structure to what you went with Gabriel Sara probably in the 10. And then I think there's probably more of a debate on the right side, because actually, and you saw this on Saturday, when Rowe's fitness dipped, it absolutely dropped off a cliff after half time, really. And by the time he was replaced on the hour mark, thereafter the game was dead, really. So I think you'd want him to be in a position where he could probably end strong. And this is what I mean about plotting them, because I've seen various people kind of speak about penalties and that sort of situation. We've got players there that you've got to get through to penalties. If you want Josh Sargent taking one, Ashley Barnes taking one, John Rowe taking one, Marcelino Nunez taking one, these are all players that you're then having to plot different sort of routes for, because as we've explained, the fitness levels have been so up and down. So the realistic chances of Josh Sargent completing, a full 90 minutes plus full amount of plus another half an hour for extra time, it would be incredible. So yeah, I think there's clearly a management issue here that they're going to have to do, and they're clearly going to have to weigh up maybe who is in a position to start and who is in a position to finish games. And that might not just be within 90 minutes as well. So all of these things will be in David Wagner's head, and it's up to him to spin those plates. Because if you're in a position again where you're chasing a goal and you have to throw Ashley Barnes on, and then you get an equaliser and it goes to extra time, you've got to make sure that he's capable of playing that half an hour and he's in a physical state to do it. So it's a big risk, it's a big gamble, and it's going to take a lot of planning and careful consideration, I think, from David Wagner and his coaching team to really plot those. And like I said, I think the realistic proposition of all of those being on the pitch, if we ended up with a penalty shootout at Elland Road tomorrow night, is probably really remote, because I'm not sure they have the reserves of fitness that they will need to do that.
How do you think David Wagner sort of, I suppose, approaches the game tactically? I've seen a few people here in the comments saying hope Wagner doesn't park the bus. Jeffman saying be parking it, taking the wheels off and covering it with 10 tons of cement. Tom feeling it's advantage Leeds now. Wagner's too negative away from home. With all that context, I suppose we've seen it maybe Norwich away from home at different points this season. You look at kind of maybe that Leicester template where they went 1-0 up and then maybe sat back, and that obviously didn't work on that occasion. But then you kind of look at that Elland Road game and they did have a sustained spell where they controlled the ball and maybe got the Leeds fans a little bit worried, I suppose. Look at Hull, that successfully worked. How do you see him sort of approaching this game? It's a completely different game, I suppose, to those maybe in the league.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's some of those comments I think are a little bit unfair because no one was saying that they parked the bus against Ipswich and they found the balance to achieve that. Is it going to be about soaking up pressure? Yeah, of course it is. But of course it is at Elland Road because the nature of the game, the nature of the attacking talent, the nature of the atmosphere that they're walking into, they are going to have to face adversity and stare it down. And to be honest, if they don't do that, they wouldn't have finished sixth in the table. They'd be a team that was better than that. So of course they're going to have to soak up pressure. But as you say, it's about making sure you have an escape route because if not, and you get penned in, that is exhausting for a player. Ask any player. It's so difficult to play for long periods without the ball, which is why it's so remarkable that Atletico Madrid do it under Simone for such long periods and have been so successful doing it. And it's as a rule why the top teams don't do it and why they try and be possession heavy, because if you can move teams side to side, the whole purpose of that is designed to open up gaps because teams are tired, because they lose concentration. So it's going to take so much out of them mentally, physically, if they go to Elland Road and just sit behind the ball and park the bus. I just can't see it. They need to have an outlet, whether that is the ball in beyond. And I think this is probably the frustration from the game plan on Saturday, because there were moments where maybe it exposed the lack of Ashley Barnes in that attacking setup, but there were opportunities where they could have dropped the ball in behind what was quite a high Leeds line at points, Rodon and Ampadu against Sargent, but because Sargent was kind of isolated really because they didn't have that physical presence in Barnes, it allowed the two Leeds defenders just to stalk him really and follow him and made that sort of a 1-versus-1 battle. And also the quality of Norwich's work in possession to try and get the ball over the top, particularly through the likes of Ben Gibson, wasn't good enough. So that for me is what it needs to be. There are going to be periods, I'm afraid, where they're going to soak up pressure and they're going to have a lot of men behind the ball. That's the reality of it. I think, the idea that maybe they're going to go and be gun-ho is naive, to be honest. So they are going to do that. So then it's about how do you get out when you have those opportunities with the ball? How do you make the most of them? And I think there'll be enough pockets there and enough and Leeds will commit enough men forward. We all know how Daniel Farke played. We watched it here for a 4-year period. There will be opportunities for Norwich to get forward. So then it's about the quality of the possession, the quality of their ability to find players moving forward. And it's also why playing Josh Sargent is so important, because if you don't have him, I'm not sure they've got another striking option that can really go and work that space in behind and the channels with the same effectiveness. So that is the way that I see it. And then, of course, it's about Josh Sargent holding the ball well enough or progressing the ball well enough and eating into enough space that he can get supporting bodies around it. And that is how Norwich then can establish themselves in Leeds half. So there's always a balance to these things. And yeah, for me, it's probably important that for all the emphasis that will be on, rightly, their ability to contain and frustrate Leeds and that crowd as well, there also needs to be a plan to get out of that and to get themselves up the pitch, because if they don't do that often enough, then, as the comments have suggested, it has the makings of a long evening, should we say, if they just go there and think they can put 11 men behind the ball and play for a 0-0, I think.
Yeah, just moving the attention now onto Leeds. Just intrigued to kind of get your thoughts on their performance at Carrow Road. Were you surprised maybe at the way they set up? I felt Norwich's two fullbacks kind of nullified the threats of Somerville and Nonto very well. Jack Stacey and Yanulis both coming in for rightful praise after that game. I expect a different test tomorrow. We know, it's at Elland Road. They're going to have the home crowd behind them. It's probably on sort of their emphasis, I suppose, to go and attack the game and try and get, the result. But they've also been scarred, I suppose, by playoff results of the past, maybe in that hoodoo. And Norwich have maybe got that David Wagner element of, a manager that's been to Hillsborough before on a big stadium, difficult at night, difficult atmosphere, and he managed to do a job and navigate a route to Wembley. What are you expecting, I suppose, from a Leeds perspective tomorrow night?
Yeah, I think that probably you'd expect them to be a little bit more adventurous than they were at Carrow Road. I don't think there'll be quite as much of the passiveness as maybe there was at points during Carrow, particularly in the opening half an hour, where maybe they had to do a lot of what Norwich will have to do in the opening half an hour tomorrow, which is contain, frustrate, and actually the fact you had Daniel Farke post-game speaking about how well they'd limited Norwich in terms of those central areas and preventing the sort of shots that we've seen Gabriel Sara take, the type of service that we've seen into Josh Sargent. I think they viewed that as a massive success. So I think they'll be feeling really confident after a 0-0 draw at Norwich. And you go back, I know you referenced their playoff trauma, but actually you think back to Norwich's successful playoff campaign. I spoke to Alex Neil last week in the build-up to this game and kind of what you need to do to win the playoffs, essentially. He spoke about that 2015 campaign and that first game that they had against Ipswich at Portman Road, where there was probably so much emphasis on that Ipswich crowd to make sure they went to Carrow Road with an advantage. They obviously drew that game, and that created confidence within him, within the squad, that they could then take it back to Carrow Road with their support, with the quality that they had to win the game. And Daniel Farke and that Leeds team will be thinking exactly the same. And for me, that this is why there's an element in truth behind, I think, what Wagner said when he spoke about the fact that, every minute that you eat away, every 10 minutes you can take off the clock, it ramps up the pressure. And that for me is where the kind of corridor of opportunity is for Norwich, so to speak. So look, Leeds have incredible talent. They will create chances, and Norwich have a very good goalkeeper, so they're going to be reliant on him, I think, as well as some really good defending. So yeah, it's going to be tough, but this emphasizes it, because I think, and you're right what you said there, David Wagner clearly has experience of masterminding similar types of experiences. But if they think with the attacking quality that Leeds have that they can just go there and contain for 90 minutes, potentially longer, I just think that's a non-starter, really. They're going to have to go and impact things at the top end of the pitch. Of course, it will be about that, but there's no way that I think, with the quality of Somerville, Nonto, Ruter, Dan James, who's going to be back and probably more available to play more of a part. Jayden Anthony, who came off the bench, Joel Pirot. These are not players that you're going to be able to contain for 90 minutes solely. Of course, you're going to need other elements, good goalkeeping, as well as a bit of luck. So. Look, I think Leeds are going to be fast out of the blocks, but I don't think they're going to be quite as gung-ho as people think, because, and it's been interesting that Farke highlighted it post-game, Norwich have ability in transition, they have pace, they have quality, they can hurt you, and that's the type of game that Norwich want. Norwich want Leeds to go and commit loads of men forward, so that leaves space and makes it a little bit more open for them. So I think they'll be a little bit more measured, at least in the initial stages, and I think they'll be hoping that quality can come through. But again, my one thing with Leeds is I don't think they have huge amounts of creativity from deeper midfield areas. You look at Glenn Kamara and Gruev. I'm just not sure they'll probably go and score now. I said this, but over the course of this season, they haven't really contributed in terms of goals or assists particularly. So they are going to be reliant on those wide areas, and that is why we're probably looking at, and you said it, Jack Stacey, Dimi Yanulis to produce some unbelievable individual performances again to nullify two exceptionally talented players at this level. So yeah, they will want more. I think we'll see more of them taking the initiative, and it's going to be up to Norwich to try and survive 10-minute, 20-minute chunks of this contest, I think.
Yeah, we'll see the comments and questions flooding through. We will come around to those very, very shortly. In the regular season, Norwich 19th in the Championship away form record. Ipswich are top. Leeds are second in the home record. I think it's just 2 defeats. They both kind of came in the latter stage of the season. Can we read anything into that? I know David Wagner's kind of been quite quick to sort of shift the regular season away from this. It's just, free games. It's the opportunity to get to the Premier League. Norwich have struggled a little bit on the road. We've mentioned that, but they've also had more success away from home, typically against sides in and around the top 6. So can they take any confidence from that, or, is it kind of a completely separate entity?
Yeah, I guess they can take as much confidence from that as the fact that Leeds have lost their last 2 home games against Blackburn and Southampton. So I think it's all up to you how individually how people interpret these things. I think it's it's clearly an issue. Norwich haven't been great on the road this year, and that's partly been down to some tactical stuff. That's partly been down to some mental stuff as well. So this is the biggest challenge of them all. But what you would say about that Elland Road game is that, and you mentioned it, for a portion they played pretty well without probably really converting what was large spells of possession into anything tangible from an attacking perspective. But me and you were in Elland Road that night. The Leeds fans were turning after that long spell of possession. They were growing in frustration that Leeds weren't applying more pressure, but by the same token, Leeds were controlling the game with what they were doing without the ball, and they were kind of letting Norwich have the ball in areas that weren't hurtful for them. So yeah, it's cat and mouse, isn't it? How much these things dictate and actually mean. I think, given the magnitude of the game, and the reality is, if Norwich get through, they're going to have to play another game away from home at Wembley. If you subscribe to that view or not. So yeah, look, I think you can read into a whole host of stats. I think the playoffs are so unique. I think the stakes are so high. that I'm not quite sure it will hold any relevance. Of course, it's probably one of those things that will be magnified if they don't win, and probably not spoken about if they do. So that's the way I'm looking at it, and I guess time will tell. But yeah, clearly, I think they can take inspiration. You referenced it, Hull, Preston. Those are the type of away games that they need to be. Ipswich away, Southampton away, even though that was at the start of the season. So there was probably the lack of limitation from the league table in terms of, you're going to a Leicester and playing that sort of quality. That limitation, mental limitation, wasn't there. So I think there are examples of them doing jobs on teams, very good teams in the Championship away from home. So that's what they need to draw confidence from. Equally, that game against Leeds in January. So those are the things that I think I'd be leaning on rather than perhaps the away record more generally.
If Norwich are going to be successful and navigate a route to Wembley, Connor, how are they going to do it? Do you think it's going to be about turning that home crowd, trying to get themselves ahead early and then hold on to it? Is it about trying to get to penalties and then trying to win that way? Is it David Wagner's experience? Is it a certain player? What's kind of maybe going to be the key ingredient that's going to see Norwich through?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot today, and it's I'm not sure scoring early would help, if I'm honest, because I think that would create more intensity in terms of the crowd. I think what they need to do is, as I said, almost survive. Divvy the game up into kind of chunks and work your way through that. So can they get through the first 20 minutes? Can they then get through the second 20 minutes? Can they then get to half time? Can they survive the first 15 minutes? And if you can keep doing that and you can keep surviving those periods, I think you grow in confidence. And like I said earlier, it's about, for as much of the talk is about how they contain Leeds, I think there also needs to be an emphasis on how they get out and how they make the use of the ball when it does come. And maybe that is why the Elland Road example is pertinent, because if they can do that and add some kind of end product, then there's ability there to go and hurt Leeds. And I think we all saw it on Sunday. There's vulnerabilities to this Leeds team as well that you can go and hurt. So I think it's about balance for me. It's about balancing the approach. I think it's about surviving what I think will be an early onslaught with the atmosphere and the intensity in that place. And then it's the question of, can you grow into the game? Can you grab it by the scruff of its neck? Can you get some control of it? And when they do inevitably have a period where they see a bit more of the ball, they maybe get themselves up the pitch, then can they make what limited opportunities they have count? Because if you think about that Elland Road game in January, Gabriel Sara had a big chance. I think Kenny McLean had a big chance. I'm struggling thereafter. So two big chances. So then can they be clinical in the moments that matter? Because there may only be one or two or three of them. So that's the big question for me. And if they can do all of those things, then it's absolutely a possibility that Norwich City can win this game and get themselves to Wembley.
If this game doesn't go as we all hope and, Norwich do fall short, could you see a really quick turnaround sort of after this game in terms of maybe those out of contract being announced, maybe more sort of indicators of how next season's going to be, in terms of moving forwards of the players maybe, and those all involved in kind of the process of building up to a new season? Is it going to be putting this straight under the carpet and moving on? Obviously, we hope that's not the case. We hope Norwich are at Wembley and we're all, gearing up for that. But just is that scenario, could you see a quick movement?
Yeah, I think they'd be keen to turn the page quickly, wouldn't they? Because, why wouldn't you? Semi-final defeat and everything that comes with that, you'd want to start afresh. So, yeah, I could see that. But again, I think the full concentration, certainly from everyone internally, and what they'll tell you is the focus is on this game, and rightly so, because it's so big. And, then the fallout of it, if they win, they're likely probably to go away, I would suggest, for a few days on a sort of training sort of camp abroad. And if they don't, then like you say, I would expect there to be a pretty quick turnaround in terms of what we can expect with news and whatnot. So either way, I think it's going to be an interesting few days, but ultimately right now, or in the here and now, I think probably the conversation is rightly focused on tomorrow night, making sure that the performance is good, that hopefully the outcome is good, and hopefully they put themselves in the best position possible to beat Leeds United at Elland Road over the course of the tie, however that looks like. So, I think, as you say, naturally, if the season ends, as other teams will, they'll be released and retain lists. We'll get updates and players and whatnot, and then then we can debate and discuss that thereafter. But until then, it's going to be on Elland Road and the focus on that.
Yeah, we'll move straight back into the comments now. There's a few in here. Jason Butcher, for me, we trust a man who got many, including myself, have said an average squad into the playoffs. Let him go with what he feels is right. The players trust him. He feels it will be a little bit like the whole game, maybe. I think I spoke about that a little bit in the podcast, just about trying to, frustrate a little bit of quality, maybe that magic moment. Lewis Elliott, I think Sydney in the 10 acting like Barnes will be better than Zara in the 10, because in his 10 minutes of play, Sydney has shown he can hold the ball up Do you agree with that assessment, Connor? Is it going to be a little bit difficult to throw a man that's played limited minutes into sort of cauldron of noise at Elland Road?
Yeah, I think so. And this was, slightly my point about the management of him, a few weeks ago. I think if you don't give a player minutes, it's very hard for him to acclimatise to the situation and to Championship football. I think and Sunday was a good example. It looks just a little bit short of confidence, maybe quality, possibly. It's hard to say that without seeing a bigger sample of him, but. It's difficult enough being a sub anyway. When you've done that and you haven't had minutes, then it's difficult. I personally don't think he's capable. Well, not capable. That's unfair, but I don't think his skill set is suited to that second striker role, because that's more about mobility and pressing and intelligence and physicality. And I think everything that we've seen / not seen / heard has been about how good he is in the penalty area and how good he is at converting those opportunities from close range. And those are the type of situations really that we've not seen him put in. So I wouldn't necessarily highlight him for that role. I think he's probably more of a 9, but I'm not sure, if I'm honest, that and having seen what we've seen, I'm not sure that he has the qualities that are required for maybe what David Wagner wants from his team. And we can have a wider debate on the back of that about recruitment and all of those various aspects. But yeah, it just feels he's maybe a little bit short. But that being said, these players, every player has an opportunity to have a moment and to make a name for themselves. So, goodness me, if you think of a moment to really leave a mark, irrespective of what next season comes, then doing it at Elland Road, be that scoring a crucial penalty in a shootout, be that coming off the bench and scoring to win the game. Well, goodness me, it doesn't matter what's gone before then. It will all be about him and that moment. So he's got an opportunity to do that. That has to be the aim, and that is obviously up to him to try and construct and try and create. But yeah, I think the lack of minutes naturally is probably a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, Nath on X saying if Barnes starts, we have more option to get out and play up the pitch, but that will likely mean dropping McLean or Nunez, which I think something we spoke about at the start of the show. William saying we're going to go and defend, but that doesn't mean we can't be dangerous on the counters or in transitions. And if we score first, all bets are off. First goal is massive. There is no press conference today, Connor. If you go back and watch this after we finished, you can sort of hear all the reasoning behind that. I think there's another comment up here. Jack Norwich saying, is there any EFL rules about managers lying in press conferences? Could Wagner have done one and said Sarge is a major doubt to scupper Leeds' tactical preparations? I mean, Wagner's often one to kind of hide injuries or hide sort of certain situations, Connor. So I don't think there's any ruling around that.
No, I don't think so. But again, I think it's probably his integrity. I don't think he'd necessarily want to be coming out and actively telling mistruths in that way. So yeah, I think, is there a way he could have deflected it? Yeah, but if the reality is, if there's not an obligation for him to do it, then I can understand why he doesn't want to do it and be seen to be saying anything and giving any sort of advantage or insight or information to Leeds in what is a massive game. And worth saying as well, Leeds have taken the same stance. So Daniel Farke isn't doing a press conference either. So both clubs have taken that. And I think that probably illustrates the fact that the stakes are so high. And I think most Norwich fans will understand why David Wagner, but also why Daniel Farke has taken the decision that they have in order not to speak to the press and offer up information. So yeah, could he have deflected it? Yeah, but if you've got an opportunity to just not do one and save yourself the hassle of having to go through that experience and frankly us as well, then that's beneficial, I think, for probably all parties, even if it means we can't maybe give you some of the lines that we would like to give you.
Yeah, I think it's got round to that time of the show. We've been asked for score predictions. I'll dip into a few of the comments before I ask you for yours, Connor. Peter Short feeling it's going to be a 50-50 as to whether Norwich can do the job. Jeffman saying if it goes to Pens and Nunez, Panenka's the winning penalty. I think I might have a heart attack. I've seen another few up somewhere up here. We'll have to scroll. 4:20 going for a 1-0 Sydney Van Hooijdonk 92nd minute tap in. I think we'd all take that. I mean, what sort of scenes would that provoke, Connor? How could you see him celebrating that?
Oh, I don't know, to be honest. I think we'd have our shirts off in the press box if that happened, and probably face the wrath of the Leeds United crowd if that was the case. Yeah, goodness me, that would be, and it feeds into what I said there about moments. You have, time for heroes. He's not quite. It's not quite happened for him at Norwich City, but goodness me, if that situation panned out, then he wouldn't have to kick another ball again. He'd be a heroic figure in Norwich, and certainly in Norwich history for years to come if that was the way it panned out, I think.
Yeah, Joe feeling Borja signs could be crucial. He's so quick on the left-hand side. Kevin feeling pretty positive as well from the looks of it. Depending on the team, says no Adamida will not be available, unfortunately, but he'll wait till he sees the team to see if Norwich are up for it, and then it's a win. Jeffman saying, you're a welcome distraction to finishing my last uni essay, lads. Safe trip to Leeds, 2-0, Signs and Duffy. Good luck, of course, with that assignment, Jeffman. Fingers crossed you get the result you require, and hopefully Norwich get the result they require. And with that, Connor, I'm going to ask you for your score prediction. Lots of positive feelings and comments in the comment section below. I know in the last podcast, maybe you had a little bit more of a pessimistic view. A few days on, how do you view it?
Okay, so I've got kind of two scenarios that I've got in my head as to how I see it's going. I think if we're talking about it getting done in 90 minutes, I think Leeds are the more likely to get it done in the 90 minutes with the quality they've got. So if we were talking about a 90-minute game, I would go for a 2-0, 2-1 Leeds. But I think if Norwich City can get it to extra time, and I think they can get it to penalties, I think they are then the favourite to go on and win it. So, which one of those outcomes do I think is more likely? Probably the former. But I'm going to be, we've got to be positive heading into this game, haven't we? So I'm going to go with the latter. I'm going to go with a 1-0 Norwich City win after extra time. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, I think in my head, I've stuck with it all week. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw after 120 minutes of football and Norwich to do the job on penalties. It's the route that David Wagner's navigated, I suppose, in the past. I know his Huddersfield team didn't score a goal at all. It was an own goal, of course, that they got in the second leg at Hillsborough. Not necessarily saying that's going to be the case. I can see a Norwich player being on the score sheet, but I think penalties is going to be nervous. It's going to be really, really horrible. But yeah, let's be positive as the comment section say. Fingers crossed we can all get a trip to Wembley, which I think 40,000 Norwich fans, yellow and green, sold out one end of Wembley. We've seen it before. Hopefully we can see it again. Dubai Canaries saying just have to go for it and leave nothing out there. No room for regret, and Wembley is a big reward. I mean, Connor, just finally, if you had a message to the Norwich City players, the Norwich coaching staff, what would it be? We're obviously in our profession, we're sort of maybe segregated a little bit away from the fan element, but ultimately we're both Norwich City fans, from day one. What do you want to see, and what's your message maybe to this squad?
Yeah, I think for everybody, just make sure, irrespective of what happens, win, lose, you can't draw, so win or lose, leave it all out there, and that goes for everybody. Whether they're wearing the yellow and green shirt, whether they're in the stands, watching at home, reading whatever we're producing, listening to radios, whatever. Leave everything out there. This is, irrespective of maybe your thoughts on how it could go, how it might go, they've got a hell of a chance. They've got a hell of a chance to get Norwich City to Wembley, which in itself would be an unbelievable achievement from the position that they're all in. So, irrespective of what happens, when that final whistle goes at Elland Road, whenever it is, be it at the end of 90, at the end of extra time, at the end of a penalty shootout, make sure that everyone connected to Norwich City has put their heart, their soul, and everything else into it. And if they do that, then I think everyone should hopefully believe that they can get themselves to Wembley. And that would be my final message, really, would be belief. Norwich can do this. They can absolutely do this. Leeds are beatable. They have vulnerabilities. There will be opportunities. It's going to be damn difficult, and Leeds have good players, but so do Norwich. And, if they can get the bounce of the ball, that moment of quality that we've spoken about, then they can win this game and they can get themselves to Wembley. So, that is my message. Leave it out there. No regrets. Never mind the danger.
There we go. That will be played, I'm sure, in the dressing room at Elland Road tomorrow night before the game. And if Norwich navigate a route to Wembley, then we can all praise Connor Southwell for the reasons behind that. With that, I think we're going to sign off on this Wednesday lunchtime. Of course, thanks for joining us, all your support, and sort of, I suppose, over the coverage we had sort of pre-match to the Leeds game. Obviously, we've got all the build-up at Elland Road tomorrow night. So if you're not going to the game and you're watching from home, or you're in a pub, or wherever you might be, following this game, or even in the away end, obviously we'll have Team News Live from Elland Road at 7 p.m. tomorrow night. We'll have the live blog over on the Pinker Plus app, which of course you can take out a free trial, $2.99 a month thereafter. I think with all that, it's well worth checking out, particularly if we do have a Wembley game on the horizon. What better time to take out a Pinker Plus subscription? Kevin with a late comment here. My final message is win or lose, don't get on the manager's back. Jeffman saying, get your Stonehenge dancing shoes on, Connor. Do you want to, just elaborate on that?
No, we need a VAR check. I never agreed to it. I've seen the evidence back. I'm not sure I ever actually agreed to it, and it was an idea by Mr. Paddy Davitt. So I'm more than happy to do something, but definitely not Stonehenge. More for the travel reasons than anything else.
Yeah, my message would just echo Connor's really, never mind the danger, give it all you've got, every single player for, full 90, 120 minutes, penalties, whatever it might be. And then worry about what happens thereafter. Joe saying his final message is we get the job done. We went to Wembley and we start a party. There we go. Party is exactly what we want. Also got Dubai Canary. He's obviously feeling confident. He's saying he'll see us at Wembley. Jack Norwich, Jamie Curison here for Wembley lads. I think Samuel Seaman's probably the man for that, if I'm being honest. He's a man who likes changing up his haircut. So we'll drop him one on that one, and we'll see what we can do. With that, I'll say we're going to sign off. Fingers crossed for a positive result tomorrow night. Of course, join us for all the coverage, as I've already mentioned, and fingers crossed we'll all be speaking next week ahead of a trip to Wembley.